It had been a long night at the office again. The man sat in his leather chair staring at the city lights outside his window. He was one of those people who built everything from nothing: his company, his reputation, his wealth. But even with all of that, he carried a quiet emptiness that money couldn't fix. On his desk sat a photo of a little girl with 2 missing front teeth, smiling wide as if the whole world belonged to her. She was his daughter, his only reason to come home. Ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago, life had been a strange mix of noise and silence. His days were filled with meetings, deals, and deadlines. His nights were quiet except for the faint sound of his daughter's laughter echoing in his mind. He loved her more than anything, but he didn't always know how to show it. Work became his shield from pain, and in doing so, he missed moments that could never come back. It was nearing the start of the new school year, and his assistant had handled all the paperwork for his daughter's admission. The plan was simple. She would join one of the best private academies in the city, a place where every child came from families just like his, rich, busy, and polished. But somehow something went wrong. A small error in the address on the form sent his daughter to a completely different school, a small public one on the other side of town. He didn't notice at first. The first week of classes came and went. Each day he asked her how school was, expecting to hear about fancy playgrounds and polished classrooms. But what he got instead were stories that didn't sound quite right. She spoke of small classrooms, wooden desks, and a teacher who read stories out loud. He assumed it was just a new style of teaching. Then one morning, as he was leaving for work, he noticed the name on her school badge. It wasn't the name of the elite academy he paid for. It was something completely unfamiliar. His brows drew together in confusion. When he checked the documents, the truth hit him. She had been going to the wrong school for an entire week. At first, frustration took over. How could something like this happen? He called the school immediately, demanding an explanation. The woman on the other end of the phone apologized softly, explaining that his daughter was indeed on their list and had been attending her class regularly. She even mentioned how well-behaved and curious the little girl was. The man couldn't decide whether to be angry or impressed. He drove there the next day, planning to correct the mistake right away. The school building looked old and worn out, nothing like the shiny institutions he was used to. The walls were painted in fading colors, and the playground was just a small patch of grass with a few swings. But he noticed something unusual: the laughter. Children were playing freely, their joy echoing through the air without any sense of pressure or formality. As he stepped inside, he found his daughter sitting cross-legged on a carpet with a group of kids, listening intently to a young woman reading from a storybook. The teacher's voice was soft and warm, the kind that could calm a storm. His daughter noticed him and jumped up, running into his arms, her little backpack bouncing behind her. "Daddy, you came to school," she said with pure excitement. He smiled weakly, still unsure of how to handle the situation. The teacher stood up, walking toward them with a kind smile. She wore simple clothes, her hair tied back neatly. There was something natural about her, something that didn't belong in the kind of world he lived in. "You must be her father," she said gently. "She's a wonderful child. We're lucky to have her in class." He nodded, glancing around the room. "There's been some kind of mistake," he said. "She was supposed to attend another school." The teacher didn't seem surprised. "Ah, I see. But she's settled in quite nicely here. She's made friends already. Sometimes children find comfort where we least expect." Her words made him pause. He looked down at his daughter, who was holding his hand tightly. She didn't want to leave. The thought of pulling her out now, after she had found something she clearly loved, felt wrong. That night at home, he asked her if she liked her new school. Her face lit up instantly. "I love it, Daddy. My teacher tells stories and she lets us paint and sing. Can I stay there, please?" He looked at her hopeful eyes and sighed. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to let her stay a little longer. Just until the end of the term, he told himself. After all, she seemed happier than she had been in months. Over the next few weeks, his routine subtly began to change. He started waking up earlier, making sure to drop her off himself instead of letting the driver handle it. The first few times he stayed in the car, watching from a distance as she ran to her friends. But one morning she begged him to come inside and meet her friends again. He reluctantly agreed. The teacher was there as usual, greeting every child by name. Her patience amazed him. She noticed every scraped knee, every shy smile. When she saw him, she smiled politely and thanked him for being involved in his daughter's life. He wasn't used to hearing words like that. People usually thanked him for donations or business favors, not for something so human. They talked for a few minutes that day. She mentioned how his daughter was bright but sometimes too quiet when things got noisy. "She's thoughtful," the teacher said. "She notices when someone feels left out." "That's rare in children these days," he smiled faintly. "She gets that from her mother," he replied softly. The teacher nodded with a knowing look, not asking any further questions. There was no pity in her eyes, only quiet respect. That small detail stayed with him long after he left. Days turned into weeks, and the man found himself thinking about the school more than he wanted to admit. His daughter's laughter had returned, and she talked endlessly about her friends, the art projects, and especially her teacher. It warmed something in him that had been cold for too long. One evening, while going through work emails, he noticed a picture his daughter had drawn. It showed a small classroom, a smiling teacher, and him standing at the door. She had written on the top, "Daddy came to school." He stared at it for a long time, realizing that maybe all she ever wanted wasn't a better school or more toys. It was simply his presence. He began to visit the school occasionally, pretending it was for meetings with the teacher, but in truth, he just wanted to see what kind of place could make his daughter so happy. He saw how the children adored their teacher, how she handled chaos with patience, how she made every child feel seen. It reminded him of his late wife, who used to say that kindness could change people more than money ever could. One Friday afternoon, the teacher asked if he could stay a few minutes after class. She wanted to show him something. She led him to a corner where his daughter's artwork was pinned up, a painting of a tall man holding a little girl's hand, standing under a big sun. "She painted this during art time," the teacher said. "She said it's her favorite memory." He looked at the picture quietly. "She must have missed her mother a lot," he said. "Yes," the teacher replied softly. "But she talks about you more. She says you're her hero." The words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't feel like a hero. Most days he felt like a man who was just trying to keep things from falling apart. Yet somehow to his daughter he was still everything. Driving home that day, he felt something shift inside him. He realized that maybe life had given him this strange mistake for a reason. Maybe the wrong school wasn't wrong at all. Maybe it was exactly where his daughter and he needed to be. That night, as he tucked her into bed, she looked up and said, "Daddy, promise me you'll come to my school story day next week." He smiled, brushing her hair gently. "I promise." As she drifted off to sleep, he sat there for a while, watching her tiny hand clutching her stuffed bear. For the first time in a long while, he felt peaceful. The world outside could wait. For now, this small, quiet life with his daughter was enough. And somewhere in that small school across town, a young teacher had unknowingly started changing both their lives, one simple day at a time. The morning sun fell softly over the small schoolyard as the man parked his car outside the gate. It had been a week since he promised his daughter he'd attend Story Day, and she hadn't let him forget it once. She had been counting down the days with the same excitement that he used to reserve for signing million-dollar contracts. Only this time he wasn't walking into a boardroom. He was walking into her world. He wasn't used to small-town mornings. The sound of children laughing, the smell of fresh chalk, the feeling of being somewhere ordinary, yet peaceful. As he stepped out of the car, parents greeted each other with friendly smiles. Nobody looked at him like they knew who he was. No one cared about his expensive car or his polished shoes. For the first time in years, he felt invisible, and strangely, that felt good. His daughter spotted him from across the yard and ran straight into his arms. "You came," she squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. He lifted her up and smiled. "Of course I did. I promised, didn't I?" The teacher saw them from the classroom doorway. Her smile was warm and welcoming, the kind that reached her eyes. She waved lightly and motioned for him to come in. The room was already filled with parents sitting on small chairs, listening to the children read stories they had written. It was simple, genuine, and filled with laughter. When his daughter's turn came, she walked up nervously with a paper in her hand. Her voice trembled at first, but when she saw her father smiling at her from the back of the room, her confidence grew. She read a story about a bird who was afraid to fly until it realized that the sky was big enough for everyone. The room fell silent when she finished, then erupted in applause. He couldn't explain what he felt in that moment. Pride, love, maybe a little guilt for missing so many small things before. The teacher clapped the loudest, looking genuinely proud. When class ended, she came over to thank him for coming. "I can see where she gets her creativity," she said kindly. He chuckled softly. "Not from me, I'm afraid. I can barely draw a stick figure." She laughed, and it was the first time he saw her truly relax around him. There was no hesitation in her voice, no formality, just a calm, easy warmth. "Sometimes creativity comes from how children see love, not just from art," she said. Her words stayed with him long after he left the school that day. He replayed the memory on his drive back to the office. The laughter, the colors on the classroom walls, the way his daughter looked at him with pride. It felt like stepping into a different world, one far away from the polished glass buildings and endless phone calls of his own. The following week, he found himself visiting the school again, this time without any specific reason. He told himself he was there to drop off some supplies the teacher had mentioned during the event. Books, drawing sheets, a few boxes of crayons. But deep down, he just wanted to see the place again, and maybe talk to her for a few minutes. She was outside helping children plant small flowers along the fence when he arrived. Her hands were covered in dirt, and she was laughing as a little boy accidentally spilled half a bucket of soil near her shoes. When she saw him standing there with boxes in his hands, she smiled. "You didn't have to bring all that," she said. He shrugged. "I wanted to help. Besides, I think my daughter enjoys this place more than she ever did anywhere else. She's happy here," the teacher replied, brushing the dirt off her hands. "She's one of those children who notice things adults often miss. She looks after the quiet ones, and she's always first to share her lunch." He listened quietly, his heart softening. He had always been proud of his daughter, but hearing about her kindness from someone else made him realize how little he really knew about her daily life. The teacher offered him a cup of tea in the small staff room afterward. It wasn't much, just a metal table, a few mismatched mugs, and a pot of steaming tea that smelled faintly of cinnamon. But it felt more comforting than the expensive coffee in his office. "You must be busy," she said gently. "I appreciate you taking time to be here." He smiled faintly. "I've been busy for too long. Sometimes I wonder what I've been chasing." Her eyes met his, and for a second neither of them spoke. There was something about her calm presence that made him feel grounded, as if the noise of his life faded when she spoke. She didn't treat him like a wealthy man or a CEO. She talked to him like a person, something he hadn't experienced in years. That afternoon, as he drove back to his office, he couldn't stop thinking about how different she was from anyone he'd met. In his world, people smiled because they wanted something from him. But she smiled because she simply cared. Over the next few weeks, small coincidences kept bringing them together. Sometimes his daughter forgot her lunch and he'd drop it off. Other times, the teacher would call to let him know about a class event. Their conversations grew longer each time, moving from polite exchanges to genuine talks about life. He learned that she had once worked in a bigger city, but had left after her mother fell ill. She returned to her hometown to take care of her and started teaching here. "It wasn't what I planned," she said once, smiling softly. "But it's what I needed." He admired her selflessness. It reminded him of the way his late wife used to put everyone else first. He hadn't met anyone with that kind of quiet strength in a long time. His daughter's joy grew even more. She talked endlessly about her teacher, how kind she was, how she told stories that made even math fun, how she stayed late after school to help kids who struggled. The man realized that the wrong school had somehow become the right one. One Friday evening, he stayed to help set up for the school fair. It was a small event, but the children were excited. The teacher was there too, organizing everything with her usual calm energy. He offered to help move tables, and she smiled, handing him a box of decorations. They worked side by side, talking about everything from favorite foods to childhood memories. Every word felt easy, natural. When the fair began, he watched his daughter run from booth to booth, laughing freely. It struck him that he hadn't seen her this carefree in years. The teacher stood beside him, watching the same scene with quiet pride. "She's special," the teacher said softly. He nodded. "She is. I just wish I had been around more to see her grow." "Maybe now you can," she said. "Children don't need perfect parents. They just need ones who show up." Her words hit something deep inside him. For years, he believed success meant providing the best schools, the best home, the best life. But in the end, all she ever needed was him to be there. When the fair ended, rain began to fall lightly, and everyone hurried to pack up. He stayed behind to help the teacher carry things inside. By the time they were done, both were soaked but laughing. She looked at him, hair sticking to her face, and said with a small laugh, "You really didn't have to stay." He shook his head. "I wanted to. It's been a long time since I've done something that actually felt real." That night, after he dropped his daughter home and tucked her into bed, he stood by the window watching the rain. His phone buzzed constantly with emails and messages, but he ignored them all. His mind kept drifting back to that small school, that kind teacher, and the laughter of his daughter. Maybe life had been trying to tell him something all along. Maybe success wasn't about how much he earned, but about how much he showed up for the people who mattered most. And maybe, just maybe, meeting that teacher wasn't an accident at all. As he turned off the light and walked past his daughter's room, he saw her asleep, holding a small drawing in her hand. It showed 3 figures, her, him, and her teacher, standing under a big sun. On top, she had written in her uneven handwriting, "My happy place." He stood there quietly for a long moment, feeling something stir inside him. For the first time in years, his heart felt full, not from wealth or success, but from something far simpler, far deeper. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had started to change the moment he walked into that wrong school. The days turned into weeks, and life began to feel different for the single dad. His mornings weren't filled with stress anymore. They started with laughter, small talks, and little drawings slipped into his briefcase by his daughter before he left for work. Every evening, she would tell him new stories about school, about her teacher, her friends, and the small adventures that filled her days. It became the highlight of his nights. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, she looked up from her plate and said, "Daddy, you know my teacher said you should come to the Parent Help Day. We'll be painting the classroom walls." He smiled faintly. "Painting? I don't think I've painted anything since I was a kid." She giggled. "That's why it will be fun." She said, "Parents can help us make the room beautiful." He hesitated for a moment, thinking about the long list of meetings lined up for that day. But when he saw the excitement in her eyes, the kind he hadn't seen in so long, he found himself saying, "All right, I'll come." The following Saturday, he walked into the school again, this time in jeans and a simple shirt. The other parents greeted him kindly, and for once he wasn't introduced as the CEO of anything, just a dad helping his daughter paint a classroom. The teacher was there too, already surrounded by children who were dipping brushes into buckets of bright colors. When she saw him walk in, her face lit up with surprise and gratitude. "You actually came," she said softly. "I made a promise," he replied, smiling. She laughed lightly. "That makes you one of the few who keep them." The next few hours were filled with laughter, splashes of paint, and messy little hands leaving prints on the walls. He found himself enjoying every minute of it. He painted beside his daughter, who occasionally left her brush just to hug his arm and say, "You're doing great, Daddy." When the work was done, the teacher brought out lemonade and snacks for everyone. They sat on the floor, tired but happy, surrounded by walls now covered in bright colors and the children's drawings. For the first time in years, he felt like part of something simple and pure. After everyone left, he stayed back to help the teacher clean up. The classroom was quiet, except for the sound of them wiping paint from desks and laughing about the children's funny doodles. "Thank you for staying," she said softly as she packed the brushes away. "It's nothing," he said. "Actually, I should be the one thanking you." She looked at him curiously. "For what?" "For making my daughter happy again," he replied. "After her mother passed, I thought nothing could bring her laughter back. But since she joined your class, it's like she's found her light again." The teacher smiled, touched by his words. "She's a wonderful child. She doesn't just bring light, she shares it. She reminds everyone what kindness looks like." He looked at her for a moment, realizing how genuine her words were. There was something different about her. She didn't speak to impress, she spoke from the heart. That evening when he got home, he couldn't stop thinking about her words. They echoed in his mind long after he went to bed. It wasn't just about his daughter anymore. Something deeper was happening, something he couldn't quite name yet. Over the next few weeks, his visits to the school became more frequent. Sometimes he dropped off supplies. Other times he helped organize small events. But every visit brought a quiet peace to his mind. The teacher always welcomed him with that same calm smile, and their conversations grew longer each time. He learned small things about her life, how she loved reading old novels, how she believed teaching wasn't just a job but a way to shape futures, how she often stayed late to help children who struggled. She didn't talk much about herself, but her eyes carried a quiet strength that told him she had seen her share of hardships. One day after class, she found him waiting outside. His daughter had forgotten her lunchbox again. He handed it over and laughed, saying, she's got my memory. Terrible. The teacher smiled. Maybe she just has too many things to think about. She's always helping her classmates. They walked together toward the parking lot, the afternoon sun warm and gentle above them. For a moment, the world felt peaceful. Just two people walking side by side. No rush, no expectations. As days passed, people at the school began to notice how often he was around. Some whispered quietly about it, others smiled knowingly, but he didn't care what anyone thought. For him, being there wasn't about appearances, it was about feeling alive again. One afternoon, while he was waiting to pick up his daughter, he overheard two parents talking. One of them said, "Isn't that the businessman from the city? I saw him in a magazine once." The other replied, "Really? What's he doing here at a small public school?" He pretended not to hear, but a part of him felt uneasy. He had spent years building an image that was strong, powerful, untouchable, but now standing there in that small schoolyard, he realized how little that image meant. The teacher must have noticed the look on his face because later that day, she asked gently, "Are you all right?" He smiled faintly. "Just thinking. It's strange how people only see titles, not people." She nodded. "That's true, but you don't have to prove anything here. The children don't care about who you are. They just care if you show up." Her words soothed something inside him. He realized she saw him not as a businessman but as a father, a human being trying his best. A few days later, the school announced a small charity event to raise funds for repairing the playground. The teacher asked if he could help spread the word. Without hesitation, he offered to sponsor some of the repairs quietly, without putting his name on it. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted to do something meaningful. On the day of the event, the playground buzzed with laughter, music, and small stalls selling homemade snacks. The teacher was everywhere at once, guiding children, helping parents, fixing decorations. She moved with the same quiet energy that always amazed him. When it was time to announce the total amount raised, the teacher looked around the crowd with gratitude in her eyes. "This may be a small school," she said, "but today, it feels like the biggest family in the world." Everyone clapped, and he watched her from the side, realizing how naturally she led people, not through authority, but through kindness. Later that evening, after the event ended, he offered to help her carry boxes back inside. The air was cool, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and pink. As they walked through the empty schoolyard, she said quietly, "You've done a lot for this school." "Thank you." He shook his head. "I didn't do much. You're the one who makes everything work." She smiled gently. "Maybe. But sometimes even the smallest help makes a big difference." There was a pause between them, one that didn't feel awkward, just calm. He realized that her presence had become something he looked forward to. The more he talked to her, the more he wanted to know. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she looked up and said, "Daddy, my teacher said we're going to make thank you cards tomorrow. Can I make one for you too?" He smiled, touched. "Of course. But why for me?" "Because you come to school now," she said simply. "You're part of it." Her words hit deeper than she could ever know. For years, he had lived surrounded by people but still felt alone. Now, because of a small mistake in a school enrollment form, he had found a place that made him feel human again. Before sleeping, he checked his phone out of habit. Dozens of missed calls, unread messages, and meeting reminders filled the screen. But instead of feeling anxious, he turned the phone off and looked at his daughter's drawing pinned on the wall. It showed him, her, and the teacher standing beside a big tree with hearts above them. He smiled softly to himself. Life had a strange way of leading people where they needed to be, even through mistakes. The wrong school had become the right place, and the quiet teacher he had met by accident had started to fill an empty part of his heart he didn't know still existed. It had been almost 4 months. since the single dad's daughter started at the small public school, and by now it felt like part of their lives. The man had gone from a father who barely had time to drop his child off to someone who looked forward to every little school event. He had learned more about friendship, patience, and joy from those children than he ever had in years of business meetings. The teacher had become a quiet presence in his world. They had never spoken about anything personal in depth, but there was an understanding between them, something that didn't need words. She was the kind of person who could make anyone feel seen without asking a single question. But life has a strange way of testing people just when they begin to feel settled. One morning, while the man was at his office reviewing a new project, his phone rang. It was his assistant. "Sir, there's a reporter waiting in the lobby," she said. "He says he wants to talk about your community donations." He frowned. He hadn't made any public donations lately. Everything he'd done for the school was quiet, with no credit attached. He went down to meet the reporter, who immediately started asking questions about the school, the teacher, and the small charity repairs. "People are saying you've taken a personal interest in the school," the reporter said with a smirk. "Is there a reason behind it?" The man kept his voice calm. "It's my daughter's school. I just wanted to help." But the next day, articles appeared online with headlines that twisted his simple actions into something sensational. Business tycoon spotted spending time at local school. Rumors about a teacher connection sparked talk. By evening, the story had spread. Parents began whispering at pickup time. Some smiled knowingly, others frowned. The teacher noticed the change immediately. She could feel the shift in how people looked at her too. When he arrived that day, she stood by the classroom door, her usual calm expression slightly clouded. "I think we need to talk," she said quietly. They sat in the empty classroom after the children had gone home. The air was heavy and even the sunlight felt dull through the dusty windows. "I'm so sorry," he said first. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." She shook her head. "I know, but it's causing problems here. Some parents are talking and the principal asked me about it. They think I have some connection to you outside of school." He clenched his hands, feeling anger rise, not at her, but at the situation. "You've done nothing wrong. None of this is fair," she sighed softly. "Fair doesn't always matter to people. They see what they want to see." For a moment, neither of them spoke. He looked around the classroom, the tiny chairs, the colorful drawings, the little world his daughter loved so much. He felt like all the peace he had found was slipping away again. "Maybe," she said hesitantly, "it's best if you keep a little distance for now, at least until things calm down." The words hit him harder than he expected. Distance. He didn't want that, but he understood. He nodded slowly. "If that's what you need." She looked at him, her eyes soft but sad. "It's not what I want. It's what's best for the children, for your daughter." That night he sat in his car outside his home long after his daughter had gone to bed. He felt torn between anger and disappointment. For once he had found something real, something honest, and now it was being taken away by people's judgment. Days passed, and he followed her request. He stopped visiting the school except for drop-offs and pickups. He didn't go inside anymore, didn't stay to talk, didn't help at events. The teacher noticed but didn't say anything. Their eyes met sometimes from a distance, sharing unspoken words neither dared to say aloud. His daughter sensed the change. "Daddy, why don't you come inside anymore?" she asked one morning. "My teacher said she misses seeing you." He forced a smile. "I'm just busy, sweetheart. But I'll still pick you up every day, okay?" She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. At work, he found it harder to focus. The meetings felt empty. The sound of laughter from that little classroom echoed in his head. He missed the teacher's calm voice, the way she saw life in simple things. He missed the peace her presence brought. One afternoon, his daughter came home looking sad. "Some kids said mean things at school," she said quietly. "They said my daddy likes my teacher too much, and that's why she's in trouble." His heart broke. He knelt beside her and said gently, "People sometimes say things they don't understand. But you and we know the truth, don't we?" She nodded slowly. "I know you just wanted to help." He hugged her tightly. "That's all that matters." A few days later, he received a call from the teacher. Her voice was calm, but he could hear the fatigue in it. "I just wanted to let you know that things are better now," she said. "The school handled the gossip, you don't have to worry." He hesitated. And you? Are you okay? There was a pause. I will be. Sometimes doing the right thing still comes with a cost. He wanted to say more, to tell her how much he appreciated her, how much she had unknowingly changed his life. But before he could, she said softly, "Thank you for understanding," and ended the call. That evening, he sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. He thought about how strange life was, how something as simple as kindness could be misunderstood. He had spent years surrounded by people who only cared about power, yet when he tried to do something genuine, it caused trouble. Still, deep down, he didn't regret a single thing. Weeks passed, and though the distance between them remained, his daughter continued to shine. Her grades improved, her laughter returned, and she seemed more confident than ever. The teacher's influence still reached her, even without their daily talks. One afternoon, he received an email from the school. It was an invitation to an award ceremony. His daughter had been chosen for a kindness award. He smiled proudly as he read it. The next day, he dressed simply and went to the ceremony. He sat quietly in the back of the hall as the teacher stood on stage, calling out names. When his daughter's turn came, she walked up proudly, and the teacher handed her the small trophy with a warm smile. "This award," the teacher said, "is for a student who reminds us that kindness is not taught. It's shared. She has made her classmates better simply by being herself." The audience clapped, and for a brief moment their eyes met. She smiled, softly, genuinely. It was enough to tell him that things were all right again. After the ceremony, he waited until most people had left before walking up to her. "You did great," he said quietly. "So did she," the teacher replied. "You must be proud." "More than ever," he said. Then after a pause, he added, "Thank you for not giving up on her." She shook her head. "Children like her make it easy to keep going." For a moment, silence lingered between them. Gentle, comfortable silence. Then his daughter came running toward them, holding her trophy up. "Look, Daddy! Look, teacher!" she shouted. Both of them laughed, and for that small moment everything felt right again. Later that night, after tucking his daughter into bed, he sat alone on the balcony. The city below glittered as it always did, but tonight it didn't look so lonely. Maybe, he thought, life wasn't about avoiding pain or gossip. It was about choosing the things that mattered even when they were hard. He realized he didn't need the world's approval to do good or to care about someone. What mattered most was truth, kindness, and the courage to stand by what was right. As he leaned back, he remembered the teacher's voice, calm and steady, saying, "Children don't need perfect parents. They just need ones who show up." He smiled softly to himself. For the first time, he felt like he was finally showing up, not just for his daughter, but for life itself. And though things between him and the teacher remained unspoken, he knew deep down that some connections didn't need labels. Sometimes they were simply meant to remind two people that kindness and love still existed in the quiet corners of the world. It was a gray and rainy afternoon when he received a call from the school. The teacher's voice sounded urgent but calm. "There's a problem at the school," she said softly. "A leak in the roof. It's getting worse, and we don't want the children to get wet tomorrow." Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and keys, leaving his office immediately. The streets were slick with rain, but he didn't care. This was more important than any meeting, any deal, any spreadsheet. This was about keeping the place his daughter loved safe, and he knew he had to help. When he arrived, he saw her outside trying to cover buckets under the leaking roof. Her clothes were already damp, her hair sticking to her forehead. She looked up at him and smiled briefly, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. "You're here," she said simply. "Of course," he said, setting down his bag. "Let's fix this together." They moved quickly, coordinating silently, carrying buckets, adjusting tarps, and plugging leaks. The rain fell steadily, soaking them both, but instead of complaining, they laughed through the chaos. It felt different from their usual interactions. There was a sense of partnership now, two people working side by side to protect something they cared about deeply. As they paused to catch their breath, she looked at him, her eyes tired but bright. "You really didn't have to come," she said softly. "I wanted to," he replied. "I don't care about getting wet. I care about you and the kids. I care about my daughter and her happiness." For a moment, she said nothing, just looked at him, and the world seemed to shrink to the small area under the roof where they stood. He realized then how much she had come to mean to him, how deeply she had touched his life in ways he hadn't fully understood until now. When the work was done, they stood under a small overhang, dripping wet and laughing quietly. The roof was patched enough to keep the rain from falling on the classroom. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw the warmth, the strength, and the gentle spirit that had first drawn him in months ago. "I should have thanked you earlier," he said, "for everything you've done. For her, for this school, for me." She shook her head. "You don't need to thank me. You've done more than anyone could ask just by showing up." He took a deep breath, realizing this was the moment he had been holding back from for too long. "I can't just be around for my daughter. I want to be part of your world too, if you'll let me." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't step back. Instead, she smiled softly, a quiet, steady smile that made his chest feel full. "We'll see," she said, her voice gentle but playful. "Let's take it one step at a time. It's been complicated already." He nodded, understanding completely. Complicated was fine, as long as it was real. As the rain slowed, they walked together to the car, drenched but smiling, feeling a closeness that hadn't existed before. Over the next few weeks, things began to settle naturally. The school gossip had faded, replaced by the laughter of children and the daily routines of classroom life. The teacher and he maintained a delicate balance: polite conversation, shared responsibilities for the students, and quiet moments that said more than words ever could. His daughter noticed the change immediately. She would hug them both at the end of the day, swinging between them, beaming with happiness. "Daddy, we fixed the roof," she said one evening, proudly pointing to her drawings of the event. "Yes, we did," he said, ruffling her hair. "Teamwork," she giggled. "Teamwork means you, me, and teacher." He laughed, catching her gaze, and for a moment the three of them stood together, the simplicity of it all feeling perfect. As the months passed, he found himself visiting the school not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. He helped with reading days, art projects, and even small field trips. He discovered he was learning as much as he was giving, lessons in patience, humility, and seeing the world through a child's eyes. One Saturday, the school held a small exhibition of student projects. The classroom was filled with colorful paintings, models, and stories taped to the walls. Children excitedly explained their work to parents and visitors. He watched his daughter, glowing with pride, showing her teacher how she had built a model of a garden with painted flowers and little animals. The teacher stood nearby, helping other students and quietly encouraging them. When she saw him watching, she smiled. It wasn't the playful, cautious smile from months ago. It was a warm, knowing smile that made him feel seen and appreciated in a way he hadn't expected. After the exhibition, they walked outside together. The sky was clear and the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the schoolyard. For a moment, it felt like time had slowed. "I've seen how much you care," she said quietly. "Not just for your daughter, but for everyone here. You've made a difference." He looked at her, feeling an unfamiliar vulnerability. "I thought I was just helping, but you've changed me too. I didn't realize how much I needed this, how much I needed you." Her eyes softened, and she reached out to gently touch his arm. "We've both learned a lot, and sometimes life has a way of leading us exactly where we need to be, even through mistakes." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. "I was lost before this, but you've reminded me what really matters." Over the following weeks, their bond grew naturally. They spent more time together, mostly around the school and his daughter's life. But there were quiet moments after classes, small talks that turned into long conversations about hopes, fears, and the simple joys of life. They never rushed, never forced anything. It was gentle, real, and steady, like a river finding its course. One evening after a school play, he found himself walking home with the teacher and his daughter. The little girl skipped ahead, chattering about her favorite parts. He walked beside the teacher, feeling an ease he hadn't known he could feel with anyone outside family. "You've done more for her than anyone else ever could," she said quietly. He smiled. "No, she's done more for me than anyone else. She reminded me what it's like to be present, to care, to live fully in the moment." She nodded, her eyes meeting his. "Then we've both been lucky." By the time they reached his car, the evening sky was painted in shades of pink and purple. He opened the door for his daughter, then turned to the teacher. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." She smiled, a quiet, gentle smile that made his chest feel full. "It's been a pleasure, truly." As they drove home, his daughter leaning against him in the back seat, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had once believed that success meant power, wealth, and control. Now he understood that true success was love, presence, and the quiet connections that make life meaningful. That night, as he tucked his daughter into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, I like my life now. I like school, and I like teacher too." He kissed her forehead. "I like it too, sweetheart. I like it too." Later, he sat in his living room thinking about the journey over the past months. A simple mistake had led to a life-changing experience. A wrong school had become the right place. A teacher had become someone who taught him as much about life as he had taught her about care and kindness. He realized that sometimes, the best things in life aren't planned or expected. They are found in the unexpected moments, in small gestures and laughter shared, in helping someone in need, and in showing up when it matters most. In the weeks and months that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. He continued to be involved in his daughter's school, not for appearances, not for credit, but because he genuinely wanted to be there. The teacher became a steady presence in their lives, sharing quiet smiles, gentle advice, and small acts of kindness that strengthened their bond without words. One sunny afternoon, as he watched his daughter run across the playground, laughing freely, he felt a profound gratitude. She was thriving, happy, and loved. The teacher stood nearby, encouraging children, guiding them gently, her presence calm and reassuring. And he understood. He had found not just someone to admire, but someone to walk alongside in life. Someone who shared the same values of kindness, patience, and love. He had once thought he was alone, juggling a demanding life while trying to raise his daughter, but now he realized he was surrounded by love, connection, and the simple truths that matter most. And in that moment, he knew that his life, though unexpected, had finally found its balance, one built not on wealth or status, but on presence, care, and the quiet power of human connection. As night fell, he tucked his daughter in once more, whispered a promise to always be there for her, and sat by the window, reflecting on how a simple twist of fate had brought them all to this point. The wrong school, a kind teacher, and his own willingness to show up had changed everything. He smiled softly, thinking of tomorrow, and for the first time in years, he felt a contentment that money could never buy. Life had led him here, and he was ready to embrace it fully, with his daughter by his side, and the teacher who had reminded him what truly mattered, quietly sharing the journey.